The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 47 star systems gathered for what many considered the most important session in millennia. Ambassador Zara Chen sat quietly in the human delegation's corner, her dark eyes scanning the assembled aliens with practiced calm. To most observers, she appeared unremarkable. A middle-aged diplomat in a simple blue uniform, her graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. The Vorthak delegation dominated the center of the chamber, their reptilian forms towering over most other species. Chancellor Grexitar's massive head turned toward the human section, his golden eyes gleaming with barely concealed contempt. For 3 centuries, the Vorthak had been the galaxy's dominant military power, their fleets enforcing their will across dozens of systems. "The time for pretense is over," Grexitar announced, his voice booming through the chamber's translation systems. "Humanity has hidden behind their merchant facade long enough. We know about the weapons caches on Kepler 442b. We know about the military installations disguised as research stations. The humans have been preparing for war while claiming to be peaceful traders." A ripple of concern passed through the assembled delegates. The Etherian representative, a crystalline being whose faceted form caught and reflected the chamber's lights, spoke in harmonious tones. "These are serious accusations, Chancellor. If true, they violate the peaceful coexistence accords that humanity signed when joining our council." Ambassador Chen remained perfectly still, her expression unchanged. She had been expecting this moment for years, though the timing was inconvenient. The masquerade had served humanity well, allowing them to establish trade routes, gather intelligence, and most importantly, study their potential enemies. But all good things eventually came to an end. The Corellian delegate, a tall insectoid, with compound eyes that reflected like black mirrors, clicked his mandibles in agitation. "The evidence is compelling. Sensor sweeps of human territories show energy signatures consistent with weapons manufacturing. Their cargo vessels possess shielding far beyond civilian requirements." "Perhaps," interjected the Altarian representative, her feline features thoughtful, "we should allow the humans to respond to these allegations before passing judgment." All eyes turned to Ambassador Chen. She stood slowly, taking her time to smooth her uniform. The chamber fell silent, waiting for her response. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm and measured, carrying easily through the vast space. "Chancellor Grexitar is correct," she said simply. The admission sent shockwaves through the assembly. Delegates whispered frantically among themselves, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sound. The Vorthak Chancellor's eyes widened in surprise. He had expected denials, legal maneuvering, perhaps even threats. He had not expected a straightforward confession. Chen continued, her tone remaining conversational. "Humanity has indeed been preparing for war. We have weapons caches, military installations, and fleets that far exceed our declared defensive capabilities. We have been, as the Chancellor so eloquently put it, pretending." The Etherian delegate's crystalline form flashed with agitation. "This is a clear violation of galactic law. The penalties for such deception include expulsion from the Council and potential economic sanctions. Or worse," added Grexitar, his reptilian features twisting into what might have been a smile. "The Vorthak Empire has dealt with deceptive species before. Total subjugation tends to cure such tendencies." Ambassador Chen nodded thoughtfully. "I see. And when exactly do you plan to begin this subjugation?" The question caught Grexitar off guard. There was something in the human's tone, a subtle shift that made the massive alien suddenly cautious. "The Empire's patience has limits. Perhaps a demonstration of our resolve would help humanity understand their position." "A demonstration?" Chen repeated. "How interesting. You know, Chancellor, in all our years of peaceful trade and diplomatic relations, I don't believe you've ever seen what humans are truly capable of. We've been very careful about that." The chamber's atmosphere had changed. Where before there had been nervous energy and moral outrage, now there was something else. A growing sense of unease that seemed to emanate from the small human woman, standing calmly among beings who could crush her without effort. Chen reached into her uniform pocket and withdrew a small device no larger than her thumb. Several security officers moved forward, but she held up her free hand. Just a communication device. I think it's time my people knew that the masquerade is over. She activated the device with a simple touch. This is Ambassador Chen to Fleet Command. Authorization Omega 77. The Peaceful Accord Protocol is hereby terminated. I repeat, the Peaceful Accord Protocol is terminated. Initiate Revelation Directive. The device chirped once in acknowledgement before Chen slipped it back into her pocket. Around the chamber, delegates stared at her with growing concern. The casual way she had delivered what sounded like military orders was unsettling. "What have you done?" demanded the Carillion delegate. "I've stopped pretending," Chen replied. "For 3 centuries, humanity has played the role of peaceful merchants and explorers. We've traded fairly, respected your laws, and generally tried to be good galactic citizens. But we've also been preparing for the day when someone like Chancellor Grextar decided that humanity needed to be put in its place." The Vorthak Chancellor's massive form had gone rigid. "You dare threaten the Empire?" "I'm not threatening anyone," Chen said calmly. "I'm simply informing you that humanity's true nature is about to be revealed. You wanted to see our weapons? Our military capabilities, our real intentions, very well. But I should warn you, we've spent 3 centuries studying every military force in this galaxy. We know your tactics, your technologies, your weaknesses. We know exactly how you fight because we've been preparing to fight you." A new voice cut through the tension. The chamber's AI announcing incoming transmissions. Multiple urgent communications from monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. Unidentified vessels are appearing at strategic locations across 17 star systems. The main view screen activated, showing sensor data from across known space. Sleek, angular ships were materializing near major trade routes, military installations, and even the homeworlds of various species. They appeared without warning, their arrival methods unknown, and their energy signatures unlike anything in the galactic databases. Chancellor Grexter stared at the display, his golden eyes reflecting a growing understanding. "Those ships, they're human?" Ambassador Chen's expression remained perfectly calm, but there was something new in her eyes. A cold satisfaction that sent chills through the assembled delegates. "Chancellor, you've spent so much time being the galaxy's dominant predator that you forgot something important. Sometimes the prey has been watching the hunter just as carefully as the hunter watches the prey." The chamber erupted into chaos as more reports flooded in, but Chen stood quietly in the center of the storm, waiting for the galaxy to truly meet humanity for the first time. Admiral Sarah Voss stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. Around her, the ship's crew worked with quiet efficiency, their movements precise and practiced. 300 light-years away, Ambassador Chen was delivering humanity's revelation to the Galactic Council. But here in the Vorthak home system, the real demonstration was about to begin. "Admiral," reported Commander Hayes from the tactical station, "all fleet elements are in position. Operation Revelation is ready to commence on your order." Voss nodded, her gray eyes fixed on the massive Vorthak fleet defending their homeworld of Vorth Prime. 1,200 warships arranged in classic defensive formations, their hulls bristling with weapons that had conquered dozens of civilizations. The aliens had no idea they were being watched. "Signal to all ships," Voss commanded. "Begin Phase 1. Cloak deactivation in 3, 2, 1. Mark." Across the Vorthak system, reality seemed to shimmer and bend as over 400 human vessels materialized from nothing. They appeared in perfect formation, having been observing and recording Vorthak military procedures for months while completely undetected. The alien sensors screamed warnings as their defensive perimeter was suddenly filled with unknown ships. On Vorth Prime's orbital command station, Fleet Commander Thanegox stared at his displays in disbelief. How did they get past our sensor nets? Where did they come from? His tactical officer, a younger Vorthak with nervous eyes, checked and rechecked his instruments. "Sir, they just appeared. Our sensors show nothing, then suddenly they're everywhere. Their stealth technology is beyond anything in our databases." Thanegox's massive claws scraped against his command chair. The Vorthak had ruled through military superiority for centuries, but they had never encountered anything like this. "Communications. Open a channel to the lead vessel. The main screen activated, showing Admiral Voss standing calmly on her bridge. Behind her, humans moved about their duties with an efficiency that spoke of extensive training and preparation. The contrast was stark. Where Vorthak bridges were dominated by displays of dominance and intimidation, the human bridge was purely functional. "I am Fleet Commander Thanegox of the Vorthak Empire," the alien announced. "You have entered restricted space without authorization. Identify yourselves and state your intentions." Admiral Voss smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I am Admiral Sarah Voss of the United Earth Systems Fleet. My intentions should be obvious, Commander. We're here to demonstrate what happens when you threaten humanity." "This is an act of war," Thanegox roared, his reptilian features twisting with rage. "The Empire will not tolerate this aggression." "War?" Voss seemed genuinely puzzled. "Commander, this isn't war. This is a teaching moment. You see, for 3 centuries we've watched your empire expand through conquest and intimidation. We've studied your tactics, analyzed your technology, and learned everything there is to know about how you fight. What you're seeing today is the result of that education." On the tactical display, the human fleet began to move. Their formations were unlike anything the Vorthak had encountered. Complex patterns that seemed to flow like water around the alien defensive positions. The ships moved with perfect coordination, each vessel knowing exactly where every other ship would be at any given moment. Thanegox ordered his fleet to intercept, but something was wrong. The humans weren't responding to his movements the way enemies should. Instead of reacting to Vorthak tactics, they seemed to anticipate them. When his ships moved to encircle a human formation, the humans were already repositioning to counter the encirclement before it was complete. "Sir," his tactical officer reported with growing alarm, "they're not fighting like any species we've encountered. They know our standard battle formations better than our own pilots do." It was true. The human fleet moved like it had fought the Vorthak 1,000 times before, countering every maneuver with practiced ease. What the aliens didn't know was that humanity had indeed fought them thousands of times in detailed simulations based on 3 centuries of careful observation and intelligence gathering. Admiral Voss watched the engagement with professional interest. Her ships weren't even using their most advanced weapons yet. This was purely a demonstration of tactical superiority, showing the Vorthak that their vaunted military machine was as predictable as clockwork to an enemy that had taken the time to study it properly. "Admiral," reported her weapons officer, "the Vorthak fleet is beginning to break formation. They're trying to retreat to the inner system defensive grid." "Let them," Voss replied. "Signal the second wave. It's time to show them what our ships can really do." Another ripple in space announced the arrival of humanity's second-line vessels. These were different from the first wave, larger, more heavily armed, and bearing technologies that made the already advanced first wave look primitive by comparison. The new ships took position with mechanical precision, their weapons systems coming online with ominous purpose. Thanegox watched in horror as energy readings unlike anything in Vorthak databases flooded his sensors. The human weapons weren't just advanced, they were revolutionary. Beam weapons that seemed to ignore standard shielding, projectiles that moved faster than his ships could track, and defensive systems that turned his most powerful attacks into mere light shows. "How is this possible?" he whispered, his voice carrying clearly over the open channel. "Our intelligence reports indicated humanity possessed only basic defensive capabilities." Admiral Voss's expression didn't change. "Your intelligence was exactly what we wanted it to be, Commander. Every trade ship, every diplomatic mission, every cultural exchange, all of it was carefully designed to give you precisely the impression we wanted you to have. We've been preparing for this conversation for 300 years. The demonstration continued as human vessels systematically disabled Vorthak ships without destroying them. It was a surgical display of superior technology and tactics, each engagement designed to show the aliens exactly how outclassed they were. The humans weren't trying to conquer or destroy. They were teaching a lesson about the dangers of underestimating their prey. On Vorth Prime, civilian populations watched in awe as their supposedly invincible fleet was methodically dismantled by an enemy they had never taken seriously. The humans weren't behaving like conquerors. They weren't targeting civilian installations or demanding surrender. They were simply demonstrating that the Vorthak Empire's military supremacy was an illusion. "Commander," Admiral Voss continued, "I want you to understand something important. What you're witnessing today isn't the full extent of human military capability. This is just what we're willing to show you in public. We have weapons, tactics, and technologies that we hope we'll never need to use. But if you force our hand, if you threaten human worlds or human lives, you'll discover that our restraint today was a courtesy we may not extend tomorrow. Thane Gox's mind reeled as he tried to process the implications. If this demonstration was only a fraction of human capability, what were they truly capable of? How long had they been preparing? How many other species had made the same mistake his empire was making right now? "What do you want?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Peace," Voss replied simply. "We want to continue trading, exploring, and building relationships with other species. But we also want everyone to understand that humanity's peaceful nature is a choice, not a weakness. We've spent centuries learning how to protect ourselves and our allies. Today we're sharing that knowledge with anyone who might have forgotten the difference between peaceful and helpless." The message was clear, and it was being broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. Humanity had revealed its true nature, and the universe would never be the same. Dr. Elena Vasquez materialized in the research facility on Kepler 442b, just as the security alerts began blaring throughout the complex. Around her, scientists and technicians moved with practiced urgency, shutting down camouflage systems that had hidden humanity's true activities for decades. What the galaxy had thought was a simple terraforming research station was about to reveal itself as something far more significant. Dr. Vasquez called her assistant, Marcus Kim, as he approached with a tablet displaying incoming communications. "We're receiving confirmation signals from facilities across 17 systems. Operation Revelation is proceeding on schedule." Elena nodded, her dark eyes reflecting the holographic displays that were coming online around them. The facility's true nature was emerging from beneath layers of carefully crafted deception. Walls that had appeared to be simple laboratory surfaces retracted to reveal advanced manufacturing centers. What had seemed like agricultural research areas transformed into weapons testing ranges. The illusion had been perfect, maintained for over a century. "Bring up the long-range sensors," Elena commanded. "I want to see everything that's happening across the galaxy." The main display activated, showing the real-time status of human operations from the outer rim to the core worlds. At the Galactic Council, Ambassador Chen was fielding increasingly frantic questions from alien delegates. In the Vorthak system, Admiral Voss was demonstrating the true capabilities of human naval forces. But here, on humanity's primary research world, the real revelation was just beginning. "Ma'am," reported Chief Engineer Thompson from across the control center, "all camouflage systems are offline. The manufacturing facilities are fully exposed. Shall I activate the demonstration protocols?" Elena considered for a moment. The alien intelligence services would be watching, trying to understand what humanity had really been doing all these years. It was time to show them the fruits of 3 centuries of careful preparation. "Activate Demonstration Protocol 7, she ordered. "Let's show them what human ingenuity looks like when it's not pretending to be harmless." The facility around them began to transform. Massive construction bays opened to reveal ships unlike anything in the galactic databases. These weren't the sleek warships currently engaging the Vorthak fleet. These were something entirely different. Exploration vessels capable of crossing galactic distances in weeks rather than years. Mobile research stations that could establish new colonies in hostile environments. Defensive platforms that could protect entire star systems. But most impressive were the manufacturing systems themselves. Automated factories that could turn raw materials into finished starships in a matter of hours. Molecular assemblers that could create any technology humanity needed from basic elements. The infrastructure for an industrial capacity that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Dr. Vasquez," Marcus said quietly, "we're receiving priority communications from the Altarian Science Collective. They want to know how we've achieved our manufacturing capabilities." Elena smiled. The Altarians were perhaps the most scientifically advanced species in the galaxy, and they had been humanity's closest research partners for decades. What they didn't know was that humans had been carefully learning from every interaction while sharing only selected discoveries in return. "Open a channel to Dr. Cathara," Elena instructed. The holographic display shimmered, revealing the familiar feline features of the Altarian chief scientist. Dr. Cathara's expression was a mixture of confusion and growing understanding as she observed the human facility's true nature. "Elena," Cathara began, her voice carrying the careful modulation that indicated deep thought, "I am beginning to comprehend the scope of what your species has accomplished. The manufacturing systems you are revealing exceed our theoretical capabilities by orders of magnitude." "We've had excellent teachers," Elena replied diplomatically. "Every species we've worked with has contributed to our knowledge base. The Altarians taught us about quantum manufacturing. The Corellians shared their metallurgy techniques. Even Dvorthak unknowingly helped us understand the practical applications of their weapons technology." The implication was staggering. Humanity hadn't just been trading and researching in isolation. They had been systematically learning from every advanced civilization they encountered, combining technologies and techniques in ways no single species had imagined. "You've been using our collaborative research projects as a learning opportunity," Cathara observed. "Every joint venture, every shared discovery, you were studying us as much as working with us." "We were learning," Elena corrected gently. "There's a difference. We never stole or betrayed trust. We simply paid very close attention to everything we were taught, and we applied that knowledge more broadly than perhaps our teachers expected." On the display, additional facilities were coming online across human space. Agricultural worlds revealed themselves as massive food production centers capable of feeding billions. Mining operations exposed themselves as sources of exotic materials that shouldn't have been accessible to a species of humanity's supposed technological level. Research stations displayed technologies that combined the best achievements of dozens of different civilizations. "The scope of this deception is remarkable," admitted Dr. Cathara. "But I must ask, why reveal yourselves now? You could have maintained this masquerade indefinitely." Elena's expression grew serious. "Because someone was about to force our hand anyway. Chancellor Grextar and his empire have been preparing for a campaign of galactic conquest. Their intelligence services had begun to piece together hints about our real capabilities. We had two choices: wait for them to act on incomplete information and possibly start a devastating war, or reveal ourselves under controlled conditions and demonstrate why such a war would be inadvisable." The wisdom of the decision was becoming apparent as reports flowed in from across the galaxy. The simultaneous revelation of human capabilities in multiple star systems was having exactly the intended effect. Potential aggressors were reconsidering their plans, while peaceful species were gaining a new appreciation for humanity's value as an ally. "Dr. Vasquez," called out Communications Officer Park, "we're receiving a direct transmission from Earth Command. Admiral Chen wants to speak with you personally." Elena nodded and moved to a private communication terminal. The image that appeared showed a woman in her 70s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen the rise and fall of empires. Admiral Chen had been the architect of humanity's long-term strategy, the person who had convinced the species to play a centuries-long game of patience and preparation. "Elena," Admiral Chen began without preamble, "how are our friends taking the revelation?" "Better than expected," Elena replied. "The scientific community is fascinated rather than frightened. The Altarians are already asking about collaboration opportunities. Even some of the more militaristic species are showing curiosity rather than hostility." "Good. That's exactly what we hoped for. We're not trying to intimidate anyone. We're trying to establish a new baseline for galactic relationships, one where humanity is respected as an equal partner rather than dismissed as a minor species." On the facility's main display, the galaxy was transforming before their eyes. Trade routes were being recalculated as species realized that human merchant vessels were actually some of the most advanced ships in space. Diplomatic relationships were shifting as governments reconsidered their positions toward a species they now knew commanded significant power. Most importantly, aggressive expansion plans were being quietly shelved as potential conquerors realized their intended victims might be more dangerous than previously thought. "The demonstration is proceeding perfectly," Elena reported. "We're showing exactly what we intended to show. enough to command respect but not so much as to provoke fear. Humanity is revealing itself as a species to be taken seriously, but not one to be feared unnecessarily. Admiral Chen nodded with satisfaction. Then we've accomplished our primary objective. The galaxy now knows that humanity is not the harmless species we pretended to be, but they also know we're not interested in conquest or domination. We're simply a people who value peace enough to prepare thoroughly for war. The transmission ended, leaving Elena to oversee the continuing revelation. Around her, the facility continued to expose layer after layer of advanced technology and industrial capability, but more than machines and weapons were being revealed. The galaxy was witnessing the emergence of a species that had spent 3 centuries learning, growing, and preparing for this moment. The masquerade was over, and humanity's true chapter in galactic history was finally beginning. Captain James Rodriguez stood in the observation deck of the UES Meridian as his ship emerged from hyperspace near the neutral world of Haven Station. Below them, the massive orbital facility rotated slowly against the backdrop of a blue-white star, its docking bays filled with vessels from dozens of species. This was where the galaxy's non-aligned worlds conducted their business, far from the territorial claims of major powers. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park from the bridge, "we're being hailed by Haven Station Control. They're requesting immediate identification and purpose of visit." Rodriguez smiled grimly. News of humanity's revelation was spreading faster than their ships could travel, but many remote stations were still operating under old assumptions about human capabilities. "Tell them this is Captain Rodriguez of the United Earth Systems Fleet, requesting permission to dock for a diplomatic meeting with the non-aligned council." There was a long pause before the response came, filled with the kind of shocked silence that had become common across the galaxy over the past several days. When Station Control finally responded, the alien voice carried a note of barely controlled nervousness. "UES Meridian, you are cleared for Docking Bay 7. Please be advised that Haven Station maintains strict neutrality protocols. No weapons demonstrations will be permitted within our operational zone." Rodriguez chuckled softly. "Acknowledged, Haven Control. We're here to talk, not demonstrate." The Meridian moved smoothly toward the station, its advanced engines making the massive vessel appear to glide effortlessly through space. To the various alien crews watching from other docked ships, it was their first close look at what human, merchant vessels really were. The sleek hull lines that had been dismissed as aesthetic choices were actually optimized for both stealth and speed. The cargo bays that had seemed unusually large were revealed to be equipment storage for rapid military deployment. As the ship docked, Rodriguez made his way to the station's main conference chamber, where representatives of 37 non-aligned worlds were waiting. The atmosphere was tense, filled with the kind of uncertainty that came with the collapse of old certainties. For centuries, these worlds had maintained their independence by playing major powers against each other. Now they faced a new player whose true capabilities were only beginning to be understood. Councillor Vexani of the Rimward Coalition was the first to speak as Rodriguez entered the chamber. The tall, blue-skinned alien's forearms gestured expressively as she addressed the human captain. "Captain Rodriguez, your species' recent revelations have created considerable concern among our member worlds. Many are questioning whether previous agreements with humanity remain valid." Rodriguez took his seat at the conference table, his expression calm and professional. "Counselor, I can understand your concern, but I want to assure you that humanity's fundamental commitments haven't changed. We're still the same species you've been trading and cooperating with for 3 centuries. We simply haven't been entirely forthcoming about our defensive capabilities." "Defensive capabilities?" The question came from Delegate Morgoth, a massive insectoid whose compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights like black jewels. "The reports we're receiving suggest military forces that exceed those of any major power." "This goes far beyond defense, does it?" Rodriguez leaned forward slightly. "Let me ask you something, Delegate. In 3 centuries of contact with humanity, have we ever used military force to resolve a trade dispute? Have we ever threatened violence to achieve political goals? Have we ever demanded territorial concessions or tribute from weaker civilizations?" The silence that followed was telling. Every species in the chamber had dealt extensively with humans over the centuries, and none could point to aggressive behavior or military threats. The revelation of human capabilities was shocking, but their historical conduct suggested those capabilities had been held in check by genuine peaceful intentions. Counselor Zephyr of the Crystal World spoke next, her crystalline form chiming softly as she moved. Your restraint has been admirable, Captain. But power corrupts, as we have seen with other species. The Vorthek were once peaceful traders as well. Were they? Rodriguez asked quietly. Because our historical records suggest otherwise. The Vorthek began making territorial demands within 50 years of achieving interstellar flight. They used military threats to secure favorable trade agreements almost from the beginning. Their pattern of behavior has been consistent for over 8 centuries. He activated a holographic display that showed trade and diplomatic records spanning centuries. The data was comprehensive, detailed, and clearly the product of extensive intelligence gathering. Humanity has been watching and recording galactic behavior patterns for 300 years. We know exactly how species behave when they gain significant power. The Vorthak, the hegemony, the corporate sectors. They all followed predictable patterns of expansion and domination. And what pattern is humanity following? Asked Delegate Tysara of the Independent Systems, her serpentine form coiling slightly in what her species considered a gesture of curiosity. Rodriguez's expression became thoughtful. Honestly, we're not sure yet. Humanity has never held this kind of power before. But we've designed our entire governmental and military structure to prevent the kinds of abuses we've observed in other civilizations. Our fleets answer to civilian leadership. Our military commanders rotate regularly to prevent the accumulation of personal power. And most importantly, our entire strategic doctrine is based on defense and deterrence rather than expansion. The holographic display shifted to show human military deployments across known space. Rather than the aggressive positioning typical of expansionist powers, human forces were distributed to protect trade routes and defend allied worlds. There were no fleets positioned for conquest, no military bases established in neutral territory without permission. You've been protecting us, Counselor Vexani said with sudden understanding. All these years, your merchant marines have been quietly ensuring the safety of non-aligned shipping. Among other things, Rodriguez confirmed. Piracy in this sector dropped by 70% after human traders began regular operations here. That wasn't coincidence. Our ships have been quietly eliminating threats to peaceful commerce while maintaining the fiction that we were just well-armed merchants. The implications were staggering. The non-aligned worlds had attributed their growing prosperity and security to their own diplomatic skills and mutual defense agreements. In reality, they had been under the quiet protection of a species whose true military capabilities dwarfed anything they had imagined. Why? Asked Delegate Morgoth bluntly. Why protect us without seeking anything in return? Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Because that's who we are. Humanity learned something important during our early history. Civilizations prosper when everyone has the opportunity to grow and develop peacefully. The galaxy is a better place when small worlds can chart their own course without fear of conquest or exploitation. And now, inquired Counselor Zephyr, what does humanity want from us now that your true nature is revealed? The same thing we've always wanted, Rodriguez replied. Trade partners, friends, allies who share our values of peaceful coexistence and mutual prosperity. The only difference is that now you know we're capable of protecting those values effectively. The chamber fell silent as the delegates absorbed this information. The revelation of human military might could have been the prelude to demands for tribute or submission. Instead, it appeared to be an invitation to partnership on genuinely equal terms. There will be those who don't trust your motives, warned Delegate Tysara. Species who will see your restraint as weakness and your friendship as manipulation. Rodriguez nodded grimly. We know. That's why we revealed ourselves when we did. The galaxy needed to understand that humanity's peaceful nature is backed by the capacity to defend our friends and punish our enemies. We hope we'll never need to use the full extent of our capabilities, but we want everyone to know they exist. As the meeting continued, it became clear that the revelation of human power was forcing every species in the galaxy to reevaluate their assumptions about civilization, strength, and survival. For the first time in millennia, a major military power was offering partnership rather than demanding submission. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready for that kind of relationship. Admiral Kenji Nakamura stood on the observation deck of the UES Yamato. watching as the massive human fleet prepared for what might become the largest military engagement in galactic history. Across the void, the combined forces of 7 major powers had assembled in the neutral zone between the Vorthak Empire and human space. Chancellor Grextar had managed to convince his allies that humanity's revelation was actually a declaration of intent to conquer the galaxy. Admiral, reported Captain Lisa Morrison from the tactical station. Long-range sensors confirm fleet composition. We're looking at over 3,000 enemy vessels, including the Vorthak 7th and 9th battle groups, the Hegemony 1st Fleet, and significant forces from 5 other powers. Nakamura nodded calmly, his weathered face showing no concern despite the overwhelming numerical disadvantage. The human fleet consisted of only 400 ships, but they represented the culmination of 3 centuries of preparation and technological development. More importantly, they were crewed by personnel who had trained for this exact scenario countless times. Signal from Earth. Command, announced Communications Officer Park. President Williams is requesting a final conference with the enemy. Leadership before engagement begins. Pachurk. It through to the main display. Nakamura ordered. The view screen activated, showing President Maria Williams sitting in the Oval Office, her expression grave but determined. Behind her, the flags of Earth's United Nations served as a reminder of humanity's hard-won unity. She had been elected specifically to handle this crisis, and her calm demeanor in the face of galactic war spoke volumes about human resolve. Admiral Nakamura, the president began, I want you to offer the enemy commanders one final opportunity to reconsider their actions. Make it clear that we have no desire for this conflict, but we will defend ourselves and our allies, if forced to do so. Understood, Madam President. What are our rules of engagement if they refuse? Williams's expression hardened slightly. Our objective is to end this threat to galactic peace while minimizing casualties on all sides. Use whatever force is necessary to achieve that goal, but remember, we're not trying to conquer anyone. We're teaching a lesson about the consequences of unprovoked aggression. The transmission ended, and Nakamura turned to his communications officer. Open a channel to the enemy flagship. All frequencies, maximum power. I want every ship in both fleets to hear this. The main display shifted to show Chancellor Grextar's massive reptilian form, dominating the bridge of the Vorthak Dreadnought Conqueror. Around him, officers from various alien species worked at stations displaying tactical information about the human fleet. The Chancellor's golden eyes blazed with confidence and barely controlled bloodlust. Chancellor, Nakamura began formally. I am Admiral Kenji Nakamura of the United Earth Systems. Fleet, I'm offering you one final opportunity to withdraw your forces and resolve this matter through diplomatic means. Grextar's laugh was a harsh, guttural sound that carried clearly over the communication link. Admiral, your arrogance is remarkable. You face the combined might of 7 civilizations, yet you speak as if you hold the advantage. Perhaps your species' merchant background has affected your ability to count. Chancellor, numbers aren't everything in warfare. As your own military history should have taught you, superior technology and tactics can overcome numerical disadvantages. Are you certain you want to proceed with this engagement? Certain. Grextar's massive head turned to look at something off-screen, then back to Nakamura. Admiral, my fleet includes vessels from civilizations that have been perfecting warfare for millennia. The hegemony alone possesses weapons capable of cracking planets. Your revelation of advanced technology is impressive, but it cannot possibly match the combined military experience of half the galaxy. Nakamura sighed softly. Chancellor, you're making the same mistake that dozens of other species have made throughout history. You're assuming that military experience automatically translates to military superiority. You're about to discover why that assumption is dangerous. Enough talk, Grextar snarled. Surrender now and your species will be permitted to exist as a client state of the Empire. Continue this defiance and humanity will learn the price of challenging the natural order. I see. Nakamura's voice remained calm, but something in his tone made several alien officers look up from their stations with sudden unease. In that case, Chancellor, let me show you something about the natural order. Nakamura nodded to his tactical officer. Captain Morrison, implement Protocol Omega. All ships weapons free. Show them what 3 centuries of preparation looks like. The human fleet began to move, and immediately it became clear that this was unlike any naval engagement the galaxy had ever witnessed. The human ships didn't advance in traditional battle formations or employ familiar tactics. Instead, they seemed to flow through space like a living organism, each vessel perfectly coordinated with every other ship in the fleet. Impossible, breathed the hegemony admiral visible on one of Grextar's secondary displays. No species can maintain that level of coordination across 400 vessels simultaneously. The answer came as human technology revealed itself in full for the first time. The ships weren't just coordinated, they were networked through quantum communication systems that allowed instantaneous information sharing across the entire fleet. Every captain knew exactly where every other ship was and would be at any given moment. Every weapon system could coordinate with every other weapon system for maximum effectiveness. But the real shock came when the human fleet opened fire. The weapons that emerged from the supposedly civilian vessels were unlike anything in galactic databases. Energy beams that seemed to bend space itself, projectiles that moved faster than light, and defensive systems that turned incoming fire into harmless light displays. "What kind of weapons are those?" demanded Chancellor Grexitar, as his own fleet began taking casualties, without managing to inflict significant damage in return. "The kind you develop when you spend 3 centuries studying every major military technology in the galaxy, and then improving on all of them," Nakamura replied calmly. "Did you really think humanity was going to reveal our true capabilities and then equip our ships with inferior weapons?" The battle, if it could even be called that, continued for less than 30 minutes. The human fleet systematically disabled enemy vessels without destroying them, using precision strikes to eliminate weapons and engines while leaving life support systems intact. It was a surgical demonstration of overwhelming technological superiority, combined with tactical brilliance. "Admiral," reported Captain Morrison, "enemy fleet effectiveness is down to 15%. Most vessels are dead in space but intact. Casualty reports indicate minimal loss of life." Nakamura nodded. "Signal the enemy commanders. Inform them that this engagement is over, but the lesson doesn't have to be." On the display, Chancellor Grextar stared at the tactical readouts showing his once mighty fleet reduced to floating debris. Around him, officers from multiple species worked frantically to restore basic systems to their crippled vessels. The complete and utter defeat had taken less time than a typical fleet engagement was supposed to last. "How?" Grextar asked quietly. "How did a species of traders and diplomats develop this level of military capability?" "By being traders and diplomats," Nakamura replied. "For 3 centuries we've traveled among the stars, learning from every species we encountered. We studied your military tactics during joint training exercises. We analyzed your weapons technology through trade agreements. We learned your strengths and weaknesses through cultural exchanges and diplomatic missions. And then we spent decades figuring out how to do everything better." The implications were staggering. Every interaction between humanity and other species had been a learning opportunity. Every shared technology had been studied and improved. Every military demonstration had been recorded and analyzed. Humanity hadn't just been preparing for war, they had been preparing for every possible war against every possible enemy. "What happens now?" asked the hegemony admiral, his voice barely audible over the communication link. "Now," Nakamura said firmly, "we discuss the terms of peace. Humanity has no interest in conquest or domination. We simply want to ensure that this kind of unprovoked aggression doesn't happen again. The galaxy is big enough for all of us to prosper peacefully, but only if everyone understands the consequences of choosing war over diplomacy." As rescue ships began moving to assist the disabled alien vessels, it became clear that the galaxy had just witnessed the emergence of a new type of power, one that combined overwhelming military capability with genuine restraint. Humanity had proven their strength not through conquest, but through their ability to defeat their enemies while keeping them alive to learn from the experience. The age of galactic empire through military conquest was over. The age of peace through strength was about to begin. Director Maya Patel stood in the central command center of Luna Station, watching holographic displays that showed the transformation of galactic civilization in real time. 6 months had passed since humanity's revelation and the decisive battle that ended the Coalition War. The aftermath was proving more complex than anyone had anticipated, as species across the galaxy struggled to adapt to a new reality where humans were no longer the harmless merchants they had pretended to be. "Director," reported her aide, Commander Chen, we're receiving reports from monitoring stations across 17 sectors. The political realignments are accelerating faster than our sociologists predicted. Maya nodded, studying the data streams that flowed across the displays around her. The Vorthak Empire had fragmented into dozens of smaller states as Chancellor Grextar's authority collapsed in the wake of his humiliating defeat. The hegemony was experiencing internal rebellions as member worlds questioned the competence of leadership that had led them into an unwinnable war. Across the galaxy, the old power structures were crumbling. What's the status on humanitarian aid operations? Maya asked. Proceeding on schedule, Chen replied, pulling up another set of displays. Our medical ships have reached all former coalition worlds that requested assistance. The Altarian Science Collective is coordinating refugee resettlement efforts, and the Non-Aligned Council is providing food and basic supplies to displaced populations. It was perhaps the most remarkable aspect of humanity's post-war behavior. Rather than demanding reparations or territory from their defeated enemies, humans had immediately begun providing humanitarian aid to worlds devastated by the conflict. Medical ships that had been disguised as cargo vessels were now openly operating as hospital ships, treating wounded from all sides of the recent war. Director, called out intelligence analyst Rodriguez from across the command center. We're receiving a priority transmission from Ambassador Chen at New Geneva. The Galactic Reconstruction Conference is requesting immediate consultation on the Vorthak situation. Maya moved to her private communication terminal and activated the secure link. Ambassador Chen appeared on the screen, looking tired but determined as she worked to help forge a new galactic order from the chaos of the old one. Maya, Chen began without preamble. We've got a developing situation in the former Vorthak territories. 3 separate factions are claiming legitimacy as the Empire's successor government, and 2 of them are requesting human military assistance to establish their authority. And our response? Officially, we're staying neutral in internal Vorthak politics. But unofficially, we need to make sure the eventual winner is someone we can work with. The hardliner faction is already talking about rebuilding their military for a revenge war against humanity. Maya studied the intelligence reports flowing across her screen. The hardliner faction was led by General Corthaz, Grextar's former military commander, who had escaped the destruction of the coalition fleet and was now rallying support among Vorthak military units scattered across their former territory. His rhetoric focused on the humiliation of defeat and the need to restore Vorthak honor through renewed warfare. What kind of support are the moderate factions requesting? Maya asked, nothing too dramatic. Mostly they want guarantees that human forces will prevent any one faction from using violence to seize control. They're asking us to enforce a ceasefire while they work out a political solution. It was a delicate situation. Humanity had proven their military dominance, but the aftermath of victory was proving more challenging than the victory itself. How do you help former enemies rebuild their civilization without becoming the very kind of imperial power you fought against? What's President Williams's position on intervention? She's reluctant to get involved in Vorthak internal politics, but she's also concerned about the security implications of a renewed military buildup. The intelligence community believes General Corthaz is already reaching out to other species who might be interested in another attempt at containing human influence. Maya turned to study the galaxy-wide intelligence picture displayed. On her primary monitor, the defeat of the coalition had sent shockwaves through every major civilization, but the responses varied dramatically. Some species, like the Altarians and the non-aligned worlds, were adapting to the new reality by strengthening their partnerships with humanity. Others were quietly beginning their own military build-up programs, hoping to develop capabilities that might level the playing field. Director, interrupted Communications Officer Park. We're receiving an urgent transmission from Captain Martinez aboard the UES Prometheus. She's reporting unusual activity in the hegemony border systems. Maya switched her attention to the new data stream. Captain Martinez's ship was part of the human monitoring force that had been deployed to prevent any resumption of hostilities between former coalition members. What she was reporting suggested that the hegemony's internal problems were more serious than anyone had realized. Maya, Captain Martinez appeared on the communication link, her expression grim. We've got a refugee crisis developing here. The hegemony's outer worlds are declaring independence and requesting protection from human forces. They're claiming that the central government is planning punitive expeditions to force them back into line. Another crisis, another request for human intervention. Maya was beginning to understand why previous galactic powers had eventually turned to imperial solutions. Managing a galaxy-spanning civilization was incredibly complex, and the temptation to impose order through force was always present. Captain, what's your assessment of the situation? Honestly, ma'am, I think the hegemony is collapsing. The central government lost too much credibility when they backed Grextar's war. Their member worlds are starting to realize they might be better off as independent states allied with humanity than as subjects of a failed imperial power. Maya turned back to Ambassador Chen's communication link. It sounds like we're looking at the potential fragmentation of two major galactic powers simultaneously. That's going to create chaos on a scale we've never dealt with before, which is exactly why several intelligence services are reaching out to us with proposals for stabilization operations. Chen replied. The Carillion Collective is suggesting joint peacekeeping missions. The corporate sectors want to establish economic protectorates over the most valuable former hegemony worlds. Even some human colonial governments are proposing that we establish direct administration over key strategic systems. The temptation was obvious. Humanity now possessed the military power to impose whatever political order they preferred on a significant portion of the galaxy. They could establish a human empire that would ensure peace through the simple expedient of overwhelming force. It would be efficient, effective, and utterly contrary to everything humanity claimed to represent. Ambassador, what's your recommendation? Chen was quiet for a moment, considering her words carefully. I think we need to resist the easy solutions and stick to our principles, even if it makes things more complicated. We revealed our true capabilities to prevent galactic war, not to become galactic rulers. If we start down the path of imperial administration, we'll become exactly what we fought against. Maya nodded, knowing Chen was right, but also understanding the challenges that choice would create. So we help our former enemies rebuild their civilizations as free and independent societies, even though it would be easier to just take control ourselves. That's what separates us from every other major power this galaxy has ever seen, Chen confirmed. We have the strength to rule, but we choose not to. That choice is what will determine whether humanity becomes a positive force for galactic civilization or just another imperial power with better technology. As Maya ended the communication and returned to studying the galactic situation displays, she realized that humanity's greatest test was just beginning. They had proven they could fight and win against overwhelming odds. Now they had to prove they could resist the corrupting influence of absolute power. The galaxy was watching to see what kind of civilization humanity would build with their revealed strength. The choices they made in the coming months would determine whether their revelation marked the beginning of a new age of cooperation and prosperity, or simply the replacement of one imperial power with another. The real challenge of stopping pretending wasn't revealing their strength. It was learning how to use that strength wisely. President Maria Williams stood before the assembled delegates of the Galactic Constitutional Convention, looking out at representatives from over 200 species gathered in the Great Hall of New Geneva Station. 2 years had passed since humanity's revelation, and the galaxy had been transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. The old order of imperial powers and subject species was giving way to something entirely new. Fellow beings, Williams began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced translation systems, we gathered today not as conquerors and conquered, not as rulers and subjects, but as equals seeking to build a better future for all sentient life. The applause that followed came from beings of every size, shape, and biological classification. Former Vorthak generals sat beside human admirals. Hegemony corporate executives worked alongside independent world farmers. The Altarian Science Collective had established joint research programs with species that had been enemies just months before. It was a transformation that would have seemed impossible when humanity was still pretending to be harmless merchants. Ambassador Chen, now serving as humanity's chief representative to the convention, activated the holographic display that dominated the center of the hall. It showed the current state of the galaxy, a complex web of alliances, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts that defied the old imperial model. The new Galactic Charter, Chen announced, represents something unprecedented in galactic history, a voluntary association of free worlds united not by conquest or coercion, but by shared values of cooperation and mutual respect. The Charter had been humanity's alternative to empire, Rather than using their overwhelming military advantage to establish dominion over other species, they had proposed a federal system where each world maintained its sovereignty while participating in galactic governance. It was messy, complex, and often frustrating, but it was also working. The implementation statistics speak for themselves, reported Dr. Kethara of the Altarian delegation. Interspecies trade has increased by 400%. Technological advancement has accelerated as species share research freely. Most importantly, armed conflicts have virtually disappeared across chartered space. The transformation wasn't without its challenges. General Korthaz had eventually succeeded in forming a Vorthak resurgence movement that rejected the new order. But their attempts to rebuild an aggressive military capability had been quietly thwarted by a combination of diplomatic pressure and carefully placed human intelligence operations. Several other hardliner factions continued to operate in the galactic periphery, but their influence was waning as more worlds joined the charter system. Not everyone has embraced these changes, admitted Councillor Vexani, whose Rimward coalition had become one of the strongest advocates for the new system. The Supremacy faction continues to advocate for a return to the old ways. They claim that humanity has simply established a more subtle form of empire. It was a fair criticism, and one that human leadership took seriously. Humanity's military superiority meant that their opinions carried disproportionate weight in any dispute. The challenge was exercising that influence responsibly, while still maintaining the credibility necessary to deter aggression. Which brings us to today's most important agenda item. President Williams continued, the establishment of the Galactic Defense Force as an independent military organization answerable to the Charter Council rather than any single species. This was the crucial test of humanity's commitment to their stated principles. They were proposing to transfer their military forces to an international command structure that would include former enemies as equal partners. It was a level of trust that no previous galactic power had ever been willing to extend. Chancellor Thekmor of the reformed Vorthak Republic stood to address the assembly. He had been one of Grextar's subordinates during the war, but had emerged as a leader of the moderate faction that accepted the new galactic order. This proposal asks former enemies to trust each other with the greatest military force the galaxy has ever seen. It is an enormous leap of faith. It is, Williams agreed. But it's also the only way to prove that humanity's revelation was about ending the cycle of galactic warfare, not simply changing who has the power to wage it. The debate that followed was intense and sometimes heated. Some species worried about placing their defense in the hands of an organization that included former enemies. Others questioned whether humanity would really give up control of the military forces they had spent centuries developing. A few suggested that the entire proposal was an elaborate deception designed to legitimize human dominance. Finally, Admiral Nakamura stepped forward to address the assembly. He had become something of a legend after the Coalition War, and his words carried weight with military professionals throughout the galaxy. I've spent my entire career preparing for war, he said simply. I've trained human forces to fight and defeat any enemy the galaxy might produce. But the greatest victory any military leader can achieve is making war obsolete. The Galactic Defense Force represents that possibility. The vote, when it came, was closer than many had hoped, but decisive enough to move forward. 147 worlds voted in favor, 31 opposed, and 22 abstained. It was the formal end of humanity's brief period, as the galaxy's dominant military power and the beginning of their role as first among equals in a new galactic order. The implementation will take place over the next 5 years, announced Admiral Chen, who had been selected as the first supreme commander of the new force. Human vessels and personnel will be integrated with forces from member worlds to create truly multi-species military units. Command positions will be distributed based on merit and expertise rather than species of origin. As the convention continued with discussions of trade regulations and scientific cooperation protocols, President Williams found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. Humanity had revealed their true nature and proven their strength, but the real test had been what they chose to do with that strength. The galaxy would never be the same. The old cycle of empire, expansion, and inevitable collapse had been replaced by something more complex, but ultimately more stable. Species that had been enemies were learning to cooperate. Technologies that had been hoarded by imperial powers were being shared freely. Most importantly, the question of galactic governance had been answered not through conquest, but through consensus. Madam President, Ambassador Chen approached as the day's session concluded. The preliminary reports from the outer territories are encouraging. Even some of the holdout systems are beginning to show interest in charter membership. Williams nodded, watching as delegates from dozens of species mingled in the convention hall, making deals and forming partnerships that would have been unimaginable just a few years earlier. It's working, isn't it? This crazy idea that you can build galactic civilization on cooperation rather than domination. So far, Chen agreed. But we'll need to remain vigilant. There will always be those who prefer the old ways, who think strength means the right to rule others. The moment we become complacent, the moment we start taking shortcuts or making exceptions, we'll lose everything we've built. As President Williams looked out at the transformed galaxy displayed on the convention hall's monitors, she realized that humanity's greatest achievement wasn't their military technology or their strategic brilliance. It was their decision to use their revealed power to create something better, rather than something bigger. The masquerade was over, and the galaxy had witnessed humanity's true power, not their ability to wage war, but their commitment to ending it. The future would bring new challenges and new tests of their resolve, but for the first time in galactic history, those challenges would be met by a civilization united in pursuit of peace, rather than divided by the pursuit of power. Humanity had stopped pretending to be harmless, and in doing so, they had helped create a galaxy where no one needed to fear becoming prey to anyone else's ambitions. It was the greatest victory any species could achieve. Not the conquest of their enemies, but the transformation of enemies into allies in building something greater than any of them could achieve alone.